Good afternoon. I am sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I hate being late. We went to boarding school in South Africa and we were taught if you are not 5 minutes early, you're late. So my name is Lizette. I am an occupational therapist and I am up here in wonderful, sunny, beautiful New Hampshire. I almost said North Carolina. But I'm up here in New Hampshire with my sister. She is running for office, state office up here in New Hampshire, and I am hoping to be able to help her. So I'm a little late this afternoon because we went and did some things. So, like I said, my name is Lizette. I'm an occupational therapist. I have a company by the name of Think Different Dementia, and I started this little 1 hour live stream to be able to help support people with dementia in this group. And you can reach me at thinkdifferentdementia@gmail.com. Today is October the 31st, 2020, and it is actually one of my favorite days of the year. It is not because it's Halloween, but it's one of my favorite days of the year because it's spring forward and fall back. So tonight I actually get an extra hour of sleep. I would love somebody to jump on there and tell me whether or not they're actually getting the feed, and that my sound is good, and that somebody's out there. Last week I had a lot of difficulty with my comments. My comments never actually came up so that I couldn't see whether somebody was actually there in Facebook world and be able to see what's going on. And maybe that's why. Maybe I have too many groups. Let's see if something will pop up now. So if you guys are out there, if somebody can let me know. I do have a list of questions, or a few questions that I could get started with. Last time it was a little nerve-wracking. I don't know what I did wrong, so if I do it wrong again this week, then we will keep figuring it out. So all right, so Carrie Ann asked a question earlier today as to why people with dementia seem to focus on the negative energy or the negative memories. And I think that is a wonderful question. And I think that it is very important because it means that they're in a loop. So I really wanted to think about that one for a little bit. So here are a couple things that I know for a fact, and a lot of this is just conjecture, but most of our memories, when we form our memories are very interesting because people can have been in the same setting or opportunity. Like my sister and I, we grew up in the same place, in the same family, but we remember things differently. And part of the reason for that is because one person's memories are significantly tied to their emotions. So something, hey Eunice, oh, I'm so glad to see somebody commenting because I really didn't know whether my questions would come through this week, and it was really nerve-wracking last week. So back to the question of emotions. So we all have different emotions regarding things that we are experiencing, whether they be positive or negative emotions. And people tend to remember things in a variety of different ways. We have memories that we call episodic memories, and then we have we have other types of memories. So our memories that are highly charged emotionally are actually things that we will remember better than other things, whether they be the positive emotions or whether they be the negative emotions. So if you have a really strong, good, positive emotion regarding getting married or your wedding day and so on, you may remember that later on way more. Other things that people tend to remember significantly better are the very traumatic things, because there was a lot of emotion tied to that occurrence and what happened. And so those are the things that people actually go back to when they are not able to remember newer things and they go through the process, like I said, kind of peeling the layers back of an onion. When they start to go back in time, they will remember things that were highly emotionally charged. So my suspicion would be the reason why your loved one is experiencing those negative memories is because they were highly charged things that she could remember. You may want to try to see or think about, trying to talk to them and figure out what are the kinds of things that were very good memories for them, that were not the devastating bad memories, and see if you can replace them or bring up the conversation regarding those things to see whether or not you can get the person outside of that negative loop. Not all people with dementia go into a negative loop. A lot of people with dementia will, because that's one of the things that we, like I said, we remember things that are very, very highly charged. So Carrie, I hope that answers your question, and I will try to tag you in this later on. Eunice, do you have any questions that you want to ask me today? How is South Africa? You are up really, really late at night, girl. You need to go to bed. And then I had another question earlier from Carol. And so Carol asked, why do people with dementia no longer want to shower or bathe, and why do they seem to get to the point where they lie about it? I think that was a really good question. So one of the things that as people with dementia start to decrease through their processes, they go through in reverse what we go through moving forward when we're children in our developmental processes. So when our children are at a certain age, they don't want to take a shower either. We have to say it's time for your shower. They don't have a realization that they smell to high heaven. They've been outside playing in the dirt, in the sun, and little boys don't smell so good after they've done that for a bit. But they themselves have absolutely no realization that that is what's happening. So as people with dementia move backwards through the stages like we would have gone forwards through them in our developmental process, it's not that they really want to, that they're not necessarily actively resisting it, thinking, I don't want to take a shower or a bath. They truly are not understanding necessarily what is going on anymore. They really don't understand that they're dirty or that they don't smell well. A lot of times people with dementia, especially if they're having a hard time with taking a shower, there are a lot of things that we need to think about. If they're in their 90s and they've been they grew up in a very rural part of the country where they didn't have showers, they only took a bath. They may not understand what a shower is anymore. If they only grew up with sponge bathing, they may have gone back to that period in their life. That's what they remember as normal. We try and stick them in a shower and it scares them. People with dementia may sometimes have trouble with difficulty with being able to they had a bad experience, like a negative experience with taking a shower, like maybe a near drowning experience, and now they're afraid of water in their face. And so a lot of those things have to do with why people don't want to take a shower or bathe. They may just be afraid of the water. They may be too cold. The room might be too cold. They don't want to take a shower because they're cold. Or they may not want to take a shower because they're bashful. They don't want people to see them naked. There are a lot of reasons why people do not want to bathe. When people ask me questions about this, it's very hard in a general way to answer specifically what's going on, as I don't know what the surroundings are regarding it behind it. But as to the lying about it, I would be very surprised if the person is actually on purpose lying about it. People with dementia will have an opportunity of what we call confabulation. So we have a realization, we have a knowledge that conversations have a given back and forth, a give and take. We learn this from the time that we're a baby, right? When moms hold their babies, they talk to them and they give them facial expressions, and then they stop, and then the baby coos, and then you talk back to the baby again, and then the baby will smile and you smile at them. That's how we're teaching our children that dialogue, that conversation goes back and forth. So adults, when they're going through this process, have a realization that there's supposed to be like a dialogue, right? Lying is a fairly complicated, lying on purpose has a very complicated background, right? We have to have thought things through. A lot of people with dementia really don't have the ability to be purposefully lying about it. Sometimes it's probably confabulation. It's an ability to when they know that they should know, and so instead of being able to, why don't you want to, or did you take a bath? No, I didn't take a bath. Well, or yes, I did take a bath, but I've totally forgot that I didn't take a bath. So they could really just not be remembering, or they could just be confabulating because they know that they should be able to have a conversation about it. It's something that they should be doing. So I'm not entirely sure that that your loved one is actually on purpose lying about it. I would love you to maybe reach out to me again and give me some more information about it, so that we can maybe try and help you figure out what's going on. But there are a lot of reasons why people don't want to take a bath or take a shower. So Miss Donna said her 91-year-old mom started walking by shuffling her feet. And while she's going to the bathroom, she has her pants all the way down, bearing all. I'm sorry, Donna. I have a very visual imagination, so I can understand. I can understand. So, does mom still live with you? Does she live alone? Does she live? I would assume that mom lives with you, just off of what you're saying. So the shuffling of her feet. The longer people have dementia, they really do start to lose what we call postural stability, right? So when we're babies, the first thing that we learn how to do, right, is to keep ourselves up against gravity. That's one of the first things that we actively start to do, right? We roll on our side. We're able to push up against our, on our belly. We hold ourselves up. We are able to start to go onto our hands and knees. We rock backwards and forwards. We can sit. Good. Mom lives with you. Does she use a walker, Donna? If you can answer that as well. So anyway, then we start to we sit up. We start to be able to sit up with against gravity, and so as we're able to go through those processes, we start to overcome gravity, right? And then we become able to maintain our balance in a lot of different planes. We can move forwards and backwards, side to side, turn, right? Well, as people with dementia start to decrease their ability, their world literally shrinks in. We go from being able to see cars, going down the road, smaller and smaller and smaller, being able to locate our bathrooms and things like that, until we get to a point where in the end stages of dementia, they really only have an awareness of about 12 to 18 inches away from themselves. As we start to go through this process, and people start to become afraid of falling because they're not sure where they are in space, they start to shuffle their feet, because if they keep their feet on the ground, they feel like they're a lot more stable. So that's maybe one of the reasons why she's shuffling. If she's using a walker, it could just be because she's using the walker and she doesn't feel the need to pick up her feet. Now, as to why she's dropping her britches on the way, a few things come to mind for me. Number one, she might be afraid she's not going to make it in time. So if I pull my britches down before I get there, then I might be able to sit down and make it in a timely manner, so I don't get to wet my pants, right? Because from the age of 2 onwards, we're taught don't wet your britches, right? So one thing that comes to mind is she's trying to make it there in time, and she's afraid that she's not going to make it in time, and so she's trying to get him out of the way beforehand. A couple of other things that come into mind is that she's just not understanding yet. I don't think she's really doing it on purpose in the sense of I'm trying to bare my bottom going down the hallway, but she's trying to problem solve something in her mind, but she's solving it in the wrong way. So she still has an awareness of sequencing things through, but then not being able to know when it's the appropriate time, because that's another part of it, right, is knowing when things are the appropriate time. So what you can maybe try to do, Donna, is see if you can start to do what we call some timed voiding. Try to be preemptive about it, not to wait until, by the time a lot of these older people with their dementia, by the time they have the sensation, I gotta pee now. It's not like I gotta pee 2 minutes from now or 30 seconds from now when I get to the bathroom. And so they really do not have that control over their bladder. And so by being preemptive and trying to remind her maybe to go to the bathroom a little earlier, don't ask, do you want to go to the bathroom? Say it's time to go to the bathroom. Because, a lot of people, if you say, do you want to, and they don't necessarily realize that they need to, they'll tell you no, and then you're in a mess, because now you've said, do you want to, and they tell you no, and it's an adult and you can't make them. So by changing your wording a little bit, you can sometimes get a little bit of an ability to be able to get control of it by saying, hey, let's go, or it's time to do this. So sometimes just changing your verbiage. So is anybody out there elsewhere that wants to ask a question? Those are all the questions that I can see right now. Lizzie and Donald, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you got to catch me today. Did you have any specific questions today? Eunice, I'm glad to see it's raining in South Africa. I know you guys have been dry. Do you have any particular questions that you'd like me to answer today regarding Mom? So if nobody has a question, I'm going to go to another question that somebody has asked earlier online. I'm going to give it a second and see if something pops up. So it's a beautiful, beautiful day up in New Hampshire, and there's snow on the trees, and I live in South Carolina, so it's kind of exciting. So the next question was from Moira. Moira had a question about early stages of dementia and lockdown. And I thought that was a really great question too, because I know a lot of people are actually struggling with this. What do we recommend people do with dementia? We recommend that people stay active, that they be engaged in their environment. It's really good to have socialization, the ability to be around people, to stimulate our brain. The research shows that the more we exercise and move around, the better it is for our brain. And now with COVID, of course, all of that stuff's going out the window. So Moira, yes, I think that is a very, very good question, and I think that's a big struggle for a lot of people. And I believe you still live on your own. So the best thing I can say for you is to try to make your own routine. Yes, puzzles are great. Puzzles are really good. But if you have access to the internet, there are a lot of cognitive wellness applications like that you can download onto your phone. I have a whole bunch that I have downloaded onto my phone just for the it's on my work phone. It's not on my home phone. So there are applications which you can do on your phone is download some applications onto your phone, specifically look for cognitive games or cognitive activities for adults, and download a few of them. One of the ones that I've seen is scrolls through some colors, and you have to color match, and so it seems like it's pretty basic, but actually the more you do it, the faster it gets, which works on your response time. There are a lot of apps for telephone that works on the on the brain, then there's a website called Lumosity, and I always have to write it out to make sure that I spell it right. It's called lumosity.com. I'm going to throw it in there. Which is another website that you can it's a subscription-based cognitive training program. They have some family plans, which I think is super, that you can become a part of and actually work on brain training activities. Brain training activities have to be things that are not routine and familiar. So in my world, we talk about routine and familiar, which means the things that we do over and over and over again, habit. Routine is our friend when we're trying to maintain a certain level of ability to do our self-care skills, like bathing and dressing and brushing our teeth. We use routine. All of us do. Every single one of us do. But routine and familiar does not work on our thinking processes. What we want our thinking processes to work on is novel and different. And so, doing things that are not the same over and over again works on our brain. So some cognitive games that you can make for yourself, and like if you're somebody who loves and has always been good with language or words, like crossword puzzles and reading and things like Scrabble or Upwords, things like that, you want to not do those to train your brain. You want to do something like Sudoku or math problems or things like that to challenge your brain. If you're somebody who's really good at math, then you want to make sure that you're working maybe on some language kinds of things. So for training your brain, going back to what she said in the early stages of lockdown, early stages of dementia with lockdown, it is a super hard thing right now because we can't get out, but there are ways to socialize with people, right? We can do some Facebook Lives. We can maybe go into a group where we can try to do some group things together with friends where we're seeing them and we're interacting with them through the internet. So I would encourage you to be creative and see what you can do. You can exercise in your house. A great exercise, some good exercises to do for our brain is actually what we call isometric exercises. So isometric exercises are the kinds of things like pushing up against your hands or squeezing your bottom, your legs together and holding it, or pushing through the floor, or doing a plank, something where you're resisting something that's not moving. Those are isometrics. Good. So Lizzie said they had a good week, and then she said I played throwing a ball back and forth with Mom earlier, which she did, but she's in her later stages of this disease. Yeah, and that's absolutely a wonderful thing. Sometimes they may not get so good at catching anymore, but they really like throwing things. So throwing is a great activity. You can even try to put some different colored things on the ground, different spots with different colors, and then say to her, hey Mom, throw it towards the red one, and see if she can throw it to the red one. And so there are different things that you can still try to do to make her actually active in that. But they really like, people love to throw things later on in this process. And so Miss Lizzie, one of the things that I'm going to be trying to do is put together a course that I hope to start on the 16th of November, which is going to be working on meaningful activities, how to incorporate meaningful activities at the right level with just the right challenge for people with dementia at all the different stages. So it's a pretty big job, but I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. It's going to be in an entirely private Facebook group, so it's not going to be open to the public. Just not anybody can join. It'll be a kind of dedicated educational site. So look out for that. I'm kind of excited about there. So anybody else out there have any other questions? Otherwise, I will take another one from the piece of paper that I have my cheat sheet. Since last week I didn't have a cheat sheet, and it made me feel pretty out of control. So a question I get a lot of times is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So Alzheimer's and dementia. So let's think about it this way. Dementia, if you want to think about it, is an umbrella term. So think about dementia as a big fat umbrella. It is a global term meaning changes in cognitive thinking. If I remembered my Latin, I could tell you exactly what it meant, but dementia pretty much just means changing in cognitive thinking. So that's the umbrella term. So underneath the term dementia, you have little silos. Okay, you have little buckets underneath the umbrella. Each one of those buckets is a different type of dementia. So Alzheimer's dementia is a type of dementia. Lewy body dementia is a type of dementia. Frontal temporal dementia is a separate type of dementia. Vascular dementia is a different type of dementia. Mixed dementia is a different type of dementia. They're all dementias. Most of the time, the names related to the dementias frequently have to do with where in the brain the damage is located, or specific to that part of the brain. Vascular dementia can have multiple different parts of the brain. Some people's vascular dementia is very specific or localized to one area because it's that part of the brain that's not getting the blood supply. So they may have their vascular dementia in the temporal region of their brain, or their occipital region of their brain, or their frontal region. It's very specific to where they are, where the blood supply isn't getting through to. Their blood supply reasons for the lack of blood to their brain could have been multiple strokes or little transient ischemic attacks, or TIAs. The other word for that is a mini stroke. So some people have hundreds of strokes and never know that they had a stroke at all because they were so fast. The blood clot, boom, gets stuck in there, and then a few seconds or a minute later goes right through, and they never had any obvious signs like left-sided weakness or inability to talk, or just drooping face on the one side. There are people who have strokes, lots of little strokes throughout their brain all the time, and then later on when they take a CAT scan and they look at their brain, it looks like a starry sky, lots of little white dots all over that can be like called vascular dementia. So the vascular dementia part of it can be very complicated because each person is different. I've had people that I've worked with over the years that have had vascular dementia for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden, boom, very quickly, they just, they were at home living with their wife, they were able to be taken care of at home, and then they get a urinary tract infection, and then life is never the same again, and from that point until they pass away, sometimes pretty fast. Every person's trajectory or course of their process is vastly, vastly different. I just actually recently had a patient with frontotemporal dementia, hurt their back, went home with his wife. Because of being in the hospital, his brain just couldn't ever catch back up again, and it just can make such a big difference for each person. So Alzheimer's dementia is typically classified because of the amyloid beta plaques in the brain and the tau tangles and so on, which can cause the dementia. So back to what the question was, is what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia is, so dementia is the global term, and then each one of these is a different bucket, and each one of them can be different causes with different names and different parts of the brain. And because they're different parts of the brain, it means they present different. They look different for every person. You know, the people in that grouping have certain characteristics that are the same. Ultimately, over time, most people with dementia really do carry a lot of similarities, and realistically, it doesn't necessarily make a difference what the causes of it is, other than maybe vascular dementia. If we can get the blood supply improved and work on those things, then maybe we can change you know, some of what's going on in the brain. But there are a lot of things that we can do. Lots and lots of people believe that there is absolutely nothing that can be done to prevent dementia. So another question that came up was, are there things that we can do to prevent dementia? And you know, I find that that is probably my favorite thing to talk about right now, because I have started to it just, when you're out there in a lot of these forums and places where people are asking questions, there is a significant feeling of, you know, one of the books that I recently read talks about everybody knows a cancer survivor, but nobody knows a dementia survivor. And there's out in the general population, there's a sense that when you have dementia, or when you're diagnosed with dementia, that's it, that there's nothing that you can do. Well, there are doctors now doing a lot of research on what's causing dementia and what are things that we can do to prevent dementia. More and more and more research is coming out that dementia can be prevented, or a lot of dementia can be prevented. They're starting to realize that dementia is caused by inflammation, that dementia is significantly caused by toxicity, and by toxicity, you know, we include like hormones and hormonal changes and things like that, as well as mycotoxins and environmental toxins. And if you think about it, our world is full of toxins. You know, I'm not even just talking about, you know, the things that we breathe or so on, but plastic, you know, that our food is in, containers, mold in houses, lots of other things that can cause dementia that are toxic on the outside. So inflammation and toxicity, and then the third one, of course, today I'm not going to remember because I'm really tired. We had a 15-hour drive yesterday. There's a third process that can significantly change our and it has, let's see if I can remember it. It's also, dementia is now being called, can be correlated to blood sugar, the things that we eat, and that we are not getting enough fat in our diet. For many, many years, there was this huge, big notion that we should have low fat and high carbs and sugars. Well, sugar is actually not good for our brain at all. Our brain is made of 90% fat, and we're not getting the right fat to support our brain. So causes of dementia, there is a genetic component to it, but just because you have a genetic component doesn't necessarily mean that you will get it. It's just like people might have a genetic propensity to have certain things run in families, but by changing your lifestyle you can decrease your risk. For example, cardiovascular disease, and there's a stronger and stronger correlation between cardiovascular, the same kind of problems that cause cardiovascular disease is what ultimately is being shown to actually cause dementia. Nobody's asking any questions today. This is kind of a little strange. I would love to have people ask questions so I can actually interact with with whoever's out there. So does anybody have a question? Who else is out there wanting to ask me any questions? I love to answer questions. I don't see anything coming up here. Let's see if anybody's going to throw me a question. Carol did over here about an hour ago. Let's see, cancel. Nope, but we don't want to do that. Okay, we are listening. No, Gina, I am not that smart. I just have spent years and years and years working with people. Do you have a question? I would love to know what your challenges are, because, you know, it's hard when you come onto a live like this when you don't have people interacting with you, because then I don't know what you want to know. I love people to ask me specific questions about things that they have going on in their particular world, because then I know what you need. I mean, dementia. The thing about dementia, which is so challenging, is it is so different. You can have 10 people in a room all with dementia, and they all look different. It depends on how they grew up, what they went through. You know, the more you know about the person who has dementia, especially in how they grew up, the better you are going to be able to take care of that person with dementia, because then you'll know, you know, what kind of things will trigger you. So I love having questions. So I wish somebody would ask me a question. So I'm going to take a sip of water. I want Gina to ask me a question. My mom will one day she'll eat, and the next time she doesn't eat. Is she in a later stage of dementia, Gina? And does she still live with you at home? So let's talk about eating. So one of the last things that, one of the last abilities, the first ability we learn to do is feed ourselves. That's the very first thing that we actually learn to do independently. What's the first? Okay, she's stage 6 and she lives with you. So the very first thing we learn to do by ourselves is to feed ourselves. If you go back to developmental phases, right? So you'll have a baby born. The first thing we do is we feed them, right? They get a bottle or a breast, and they learn to suck and swallow, and then they go from that to learning to hold the bottle, or, you know, holding mom as mom's feeding them. And then when they sit up, you know, they'll sit and they'll be able to pick up, think, Cheerios or little things like that and put them in their hands with their mouth, right? And then the next step after that is a spoon and fork, and be able to feed themselves, right? So as people progress back or regress back through the phases, they will get to a point where they don't know what a tool is. I'm holding a pen. So right now, if somebody gives me a pen, I will take it and I will hold it in my hand, because I know what to do with it. If it's a different item, like if you hold up a water glass and they take it and they know what to do and take a sip, that's an awareness that there is something outside of myself, right? These are items, these are objects that are outside of me. If you hold the glass up for me and I take it, then I know there's something that's not me. So when they progress, or when they start to regress through this, the person will lose the ability to actually take an item and know what to do with it. So feeding themselves with a spoon or a fork, if they can still take the spoon, sometimes you can just cue them to take a bite, right? You can just say, take a bite. Okay. And then they'll take a bite and they'll swallow it and go through. The next stage after that is they won't have an awareness of that, but they may actually still be able to do some finger foods, like chicken nuggets, or if you give them peas, they'll pick up a pea. They can't use the spoon to do it, but they will be able to actually feed themselves still. Then the next stage after that would be where they are not at all able to do that themselves and they need to be fed. So sometimes a few things happen. They don't have an appetite. If you think about it, they're not physically necessarily active anymore when a person gets to that phase. Sometimes they'll maybe still walk, they may not be walking anymore, they may be only sitting and being very sedentary. So they're not really expending a lot of calories. And then their appetite decreases. Then something else also happens at the same time. They start to lose the ability to taste all the different things that we taste. Like we can taste bitter and salty and sweet and spicy and all of these different tastes. The one that stays intact for the longest is sweet. So sometimes it may be a preference, a food preference thing. You want to make sure that a person's eating enough, but they may have one good meal in the day, and if they can eat that full meal, then as long as they're getting sufficient calories throughout the day, they should be fine. If you give her water and then she'll hold it in her mouth and she's not swallowing, that can actually be a pretty dangerous thing, because the water can start to have you ever choked on your own saliva? I mean, I choke on my own saliva all the time, which is a whole nother conversation. Okay, but think about it. You know, people will hold things in their mouth, and then it can start to trickle down into their throat and down in. So we have we have our esophagus and then our where we breathe, right? And so our body's supposed to close off in the back of our throat when we swallow the part that goes down into our lungs. Well, if it's going too quick, if the liquids are going too quick, it can just drip straight into our lungs. So we never want them to just sit and hold something in their mouth. And so a couple of things that you could maybe try is first of all, don't let her take multiple swallows. Try to just do one swallow at a time. Second thing you can try is a type of a sippy cup where she's not getting as many things at the same, too much going in at the same time. Or if she's just taking a sip, try to rub her throat and say swallow. And sometimes even just, a lot of times people at this phase can still imitate. So if you say swallow and actually swallow, and see if you can get her to swallow, and even stroke her, just gently stroke her throat, see if you can facilitate her to actually swallow. But you don't want her to keep her liquids in her mouth for too long, because then they can go down the wrong way. So I hope that helped, Gina. I really do hope that helped. So Lizzie asked, how long do I think people have had dementia before the effects show up? Because they try to hide it. So there are lots of different, thank you. I was having trouble with my words, and yes, straws are very detrimental. Yes, thank you for helping me out, my friend, the nurse practitioner over there. I try not to get too technical with this, because it's supposed to just be some education. But Lizzie, so how long do I think people have dementia before the causes and effects show up? Well, the research is showing that there's a thing called subjective cognitive impairment, which means I'm starting to know that I'm having trouble with my thinking, but the tests aren't showing that I'm actually having trouble with my thinking. That stage for people, the research is showing, can actually last up to about 10 years. And then there is what's known as mild cognitive impairment, which can be anywhere from 5 to 7 years, depending on the person. And so in that mild cognitive impairment phase, you start to show that the standardized tests are starting to show that the person's actually having trouble with their thinking. I have, in my experience, I work with a lot of people with cognitive impairment, with deficits. People start to know that they're having trouble, but because they are so fearful of it, and because there's such a big stigma about cognitive loss, lots of times people try to hide it for as long as possible until it starts to really show up a little bit more. Mild dementia can last anywhere from 3 to 5 years. The moderate phase of dementia, depending on how you break it up, can also last from 3 to 5 years. The last phase of dementia, the severe end phase of dementia, the better care a person gets, the longer that they can live. But the last phases can be anywhere from 3 months, 6 months to 2 years. Each phase starts to kind of have less and less time. And yes, people tried to hide the fact that they're starting to have trouble because they know it's not normal. They know it shouldn't be there. So I hope that helped, Lizzie. Anybody else have any other questions that they want to ask this afternoon? I usually try to go for an hour, but then I have a lot more people asking questions, so I will give it a second and see if anybody else. Oh, and you back to Lizzie. Lizzie, you said Mom can't do the spoon, only finger foods. Yes. So as much as possible, if you can have her eat with finger foods, that's better. The more a person can feed themselves, the less they're at risk for aspiration pneumonia or things going down the wrong side and then causing pneumonia. The slower the slower that they can feed themselves, the better. You want to make sure that they're not keeping the food in their mouth because that can make them choke. But Laura, thank you for helping and jumping in there. That was very kind. I was telling everybody earlier, I don't know how long you've been on or if you're even still on here right now, but we drove up to New Hampshire from South Carolina to help my sister with her election. And so the first day we drove 6 hours because I drove after work, and then the second day we drove 14 hours. So I'm pretty tired today, and it's definitely showing, which brings up another thing. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit, right? Cognition isn't static. Nobody's cognition is static. My cognition isn't static. Your cognition isn't static. And what I mean by that is that we all have good days and bad days, right? And so because I'm mostly normal, the differences between my good days and my bad days are not that evident in a general functioning perspective. We have good days when we have had enough sleep, when we've eaten properly, when we've exercised. Like on days that I exercise, my thinking is definitely better than on days when I don't exercise. So we all have good days, but we all kind of have a baseline, right? We have a fairly normal range of where we stay in. So people with dementia, what happens, why we sometimes see these big changes on a daily basis, is because the little percentage change that they're having between their good days and bad days really make it go like a big old jagged line, right? So if they're tired, or if they're hungry, or if they're overwhelmed, or if they haven't eaten well, or if they're just starting to get sick or not feeling good, those bad days that they have make it like way more noticeable than what the good days are. So sometimes that's one of the reasons why we see these big jagged lines. Oh, thanks, Lizzie. I appreciate that. That's very sweet. Do you have any other questions? Like I said, it's a lot easier when people are asking me questions. So I try to get a list of questions for opportunities for people to ask me questions. But it's an hour can be a very long time, or an hour can be a very short time. And so anyway, back to cognition. Nobody's cognition is static. So some things to think about, some things to remember is, in older people, in older adults, the single fastest change in mentation for an older adult is a urinary tract infection. So just remember, if they're you kind of know what somebody's norm is, right? If they have a sudden change like that, you got to pay attention to it, because it could be a urinary infection. People with dementia don't necessarily have the same signs and symptoms. I've only had one UTI, and that was miserable. I didn't burn when I peed. I had had pressure, it wasn't foul smelling, but I had a urinary tract infection. So we've got to be sensitive to our elder people or people with dementia, because they may be having a urinary tract infection and we don't know. So Miss Anne said her dad is sleeping a lot and looking for his mother. We're in the later stage of dementia. How long does the confusion last? So Anne, unfortunately, people with dementia, that kind of confusion never really goes away. So as they start to get to the later stages, a lot of different things start to happen. You know, our brain is trying to, in essence, protect itself through the process of dementia, right? The first thing that we do, right, is we breathe. We breathe when we're born, and our brain is wired to keep us alive. That's what our brain, it's our computer, right? It's our thinking processes are up there. Well, we have a significantly strong will to live, and so our brain's primary function is to keep us alive. So the first thing that we're going to do is breathe, eat, control our cardiovascular system. So as people start to go through, as their brain is not able to manage all of those higher level functioning anymore, they do start to sleep a lot more, just like when we're first born. Infants sleep a lot more than, say, an adult or an older person. And we go back to being able, they kind of regress into a specific spot where they don't remember the new things, but he remembers his mom. So the best thing that I could recommend for you is just try to keep him, try to reassure him. It doesn't help telling him, you know, your mom's not here anymore or whatever. Just try to make him feel loved and comfort. You can use a lot of sensory kinds of things. If you can find things that he used to enjoy, smelling or listening to music or touch, those are the things that people in the later stages of dementia are still able to appreciate and to know and to sense and to feel. So try to keep as strict as possible. I don't know if your dad is bedridden. A lot of times people towards the end phases and stages of their dementia, they're bedridden. It's harder to keep a person who is bedridden awake. I don't know about you, but when I'm in bed, I don't want to be awake. I want to go to sleep. So if we, you know, I'll go into people's rooms and they're like, oh, they're just sleeping or whatever. And granted, I have, you know, a couple people with me sometimes when I do this, but I'll set them up on the edge of the bed, because if you sit up on the edge of the bed, you're more likely to be awake. So if they're not changing their position, they will tend to sleep a lot more. If we can, for healthy reasons, for multiple healthy reasons, we want people to get up out of bed. Not knowing the specifics about your dad, you know, I want to be cautious and very careful not to tell you to get him up, because I don't know how he transfers. I would assume that he is bedridden, right? So if you can try to bring the head of the bed up as much as possible so that he's getting some changes in his positioning, make sure that you're changing, getting them from off of their bottom to protect his heels, float his heels, make sure that they're not going to break down. When looking for his mother, I would presume he's just saying, you know, where's mom? So you can just try to love on him and be there, be as close as possible. They don't see more than 3 feet, more than 18 inches away, so the closer you can get, the better it is. If you can be, you know, really close to people. Singing, I know this sounds crazy, but singing to people, especially things that they might have grown up with, people think I'm crazy, but when I work with my people with dementia and I'm trying to get to engage them, I'll sing to them. I'll sing row, row, row your boat, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or if I knew that they were somebody who went to church, I'll sing hymns with them. I'll sing very familiar hymns like Amazing Grace, other hymns that most people would have known or that they grew up with. So singing to somebody in that later stage of dementia can sometimes bring them back to you, even if just for a few seconds, that you can get an interaction with them again. So those are some things that you can try. Laura, thank you. That's very kind. I feel a little intimidated knowing that there's a nurse practitioner out there kind of watching me right now, because, and turn on the oldies. Yes, music therapy is amazing. So I love teaching. I love talking to people about dementia. It is my passion. It is one of the things that I started to realize. I've been an occupational therapist for almost 30 years now, and good. And I'm glad you sing. And you know what? If I can make a recommendation or a suggestion, tape it. Tape it. You're not going to be sorry, because these are going to be memories that you have later on. It's a horrible process. It's a horrible disease. And I wish there were more that we could do, especially for people who've been living with dementia for a long time. But the reality of the matter is that you are going to remember these times, and they are special for you. Well, thank you, Laura. That's very gracious. But make your memories. Too many people I find are afraid to videotape it or to take pictures in that phase, because they don't want to remember their loved one in that way. But I'd encourage you to do that, because this is part of their life and their legacy. Take pictures, take videotapes of you laughing with them, not at them, singing with them, be goofy together, and really try to keep those memories so that, maybe not 6 weeks after they pass away, or a month or 7 months afterwards, but sometime or another, you're going to find those. You're going to find those tapes, and you're going to look back at them and remember the good times, the things that, we all tend to remember other things, but I would strongly encourage you to do that. So the last thing I wanted to say this afternoon, since we've only got about 3 or 4 more minutes, is I do have a private Facebook group. It's called Think Different Dementia. The purpose behind the private Facebook group is to try to bring people into a smaller community. I love the Alzheimer's and Dementia support group that we're part of. I think it is phenomenal, but it is huge. And there are so many people out there that we cannot necessarily build good, closer relationships and be able to, I cannot necessarily help people in such a large forum, and the platform that I'm trying to develop and make is more for personalized, individualized educational opportunities. I want to try to educate people about dementia, how to navigate this process, the roadmap, kind of what to expect with dementia. But then the other part of it is, what can we do as loved ones to be able to maintain and or improve our own cognitive capacity, so that we don't hopefully develop it in the future. So I would encourage you guys to reach out to me, join the group Think Different Dementia. I do answer emails. I can't promise to answer them immediately. I'm going to put my email address in the comments here, so reach out to me. Which, if you guys are watching me right now, it is very hard to split your attention between two things. So thinkdifferentdementia@gmail.com. So none of us can do that. We can actually only pay attention to one thing at a time. And then the Facebook group is just Think Different Dementia. Dementia. Whoops, no, not Dementia RN. Think different dementia. Let's see if that'll, I don't want that. Let's see if that, nope. All right, so just think different dementia. So if you guys want to join my Facebook group, feel free. You don't have to. I'm going to try to do this live stream every week. This week was a little later than usual because, like I said, I'm up in New Hampshire helping my sister. This is the plug for my sister. If there's anybody in Manchester, New Hampshire, reach out. There's one lady I'm going to reach out to up here. She's on the group, and we're going to still try to meet up while I'm up here. I'll be up here until Wednesday. We drive back home to South Carolina on Wednesday. Laura had a last comment. Yes, hearing's the last sentence to leave us, so talk to them. Love on them, be with them. You'll never regret the time you spent with your loved one. Make memories, like one of the things that I said. Yeah, I picked my name to try to make people think different about dementia. I'm passionate about dementia. Last thing I'll say before I get off is I started concentrating on cognitive abilities, Laura, because I realized that more people are afraid of going to a nursing home because they need physical assistance. But if you truly look at the population in a nursing home, why are they in a nursing home? Most of the people in a nursing home actually ended up in the nursing home first because of their cognitive processes. Yes, they might have had a physical thing going on with them as well, but it was the cognitive part of it that actually facilitated them actually needing to go to a nursing home. So I wanted to know more about that so that I could help more people, and so I started to specialize in dementia. So yet again, my name is Lizette. Thank you for listening to me for an hour. January next year, I'm going to actually try to make this more of a podcast format, and do like a podcast and then do this on a Saturday. And yet again, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. And next Saturday may be a little hairy, but I'm going to give it a shot. It may not be at noon like I hope to do, but we will do that. All right, yes, Laura, definitely let's reach out and chat. I would love to talk to you about that. My specialty is, like I said, my specialty is dementia. So you can do anything via Zoom these days. So I look forward to meeting you and talking to you. And blessings, the Lord's blessings, and I hope to see you guys again next week. And have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye.